Good morning, everybody. How are we? I've got a lot of things that I'd like to share, but essentially they fall into three areas where I want to have an opportunity to be really honest. I've been teaching 24 years. For the first time, I stepped out of teaching in July. Lots of reasons for that. Teacher toolkit becoming out of control, can't really keep up. It's a business in itself, and it was a very accidental. Started off with a Twitter account, led into a blog and all sorts of things. But I want to now use my voice to be a bit more honest. It's very easy for us with Facebook and social media to think everything's very rosy and we go to the best parties and you all see the best picture of a beach. But, Mental Health Awareness Week this week, we need to be a lot more honest with each other. And so I just want to use that opportunity here today. So I'm going to kind of share lots of questions I don't necessarily know the answers to, but I just want to share what's been going on in my head. For the last 8 or 9 months since my school that I've now left was put into special measures, and it essentially impacted on my personal journey to work part-time, teacher talk, and remain as a deputy head. Just get some feedback. Hands up who are teachers in the room, please. Hands up, teachers, fantastic. School leaders, head teachers. Okay, great, thank you. I'm assuming everyone else is involved in education, so if you're an organisation or a business representing education, creativity, hands up. Let's see, okay, great. So real mixture. So thank you for coming. Who tweets? Okay, blogs, hands go down. Oh, we've got a few bloggers. Right, good. Okay, blogging has changed my life. It's become a bit of an obsession now. Right, outside you were given hopefully a paperclip. So when you get a bit bored, I'd like to think about making something with this paperclip or thinking of a use. So I want to encourage your creative juices. Think about something and I'll ask you for your ideas at the end. So here we go. So I want to pose some rhetorical questions for you. I've got 7 that I'm going to try and get through in the next 30 minutes. Now I'm conscious Mike's in the room. Mike and I have just met. We've followed each other on Twitter for a long time. Now, Ofsted, DfE, watchdogs, I'm all for accountability, I'm all for high standards, but at what cost? £700 million invested into teacher recruitment, yet the government have failed to meet their teaching targets for the last 5 years. I'm a design technology teacher by trade. You just need to look at the design technology figures and they are dropping dramatically. In the name of differentiation, all teachers, one of the hardest things we have to crack in the classroom is differentiation. We've gone hopefully away from this concept that it's something you do in every lesson and something that you now have to do over time. But why do we not do that when we come to inspect schools? So we have 1-day inspections, 2-day inspections. We have a different framework for schools that are outstanding and a different framework for schools that are special measures. But largely the process or the methodology is the same. You might work with 10 teachers with 60 kids. I might work with 100 teachers and 2,000 kids. But yet we still go through the same process when we are measured or judged. So I'm just putting that out. I don't know the answers. In terms of complaints, so when we went into special measures, we started our complaints procedure. There's lots of reasons why we needed to do that. And when you go into a special measures school, it takes 45 days for a real quality assurance process through Ofsted, which I'm sure is very rigorous and very carefully planned. But then there's this statement, you can complain about the process but not the judgment. So it's very much like if I'm a parking attendant and I give you a sticker on your car, you can say, I agree with you, parking officer, but you can complain about how I put the sticker on your car, it's slightly wonky. So it doesn't make sense. So this article in the tests in June, 512 schools, not one school had their judgment overturned. Durand Academy in July, if you're familiar with that in the press before the summer, was one of the first schools to reach the High Court. So that was a very interesting story and it might start to change the dialogue somewhat. Through my Twitter, I've been very privileged to meet Mike Claddenbowl, who's one of the first, person in the centre white shirt, one of the first people to let teachers come into Ivory Towers and to discuss. This was 4 or 5 years ago. Then it was Famous Five in a cartoon. And then I had the privilege of meeting Sean Harford one-to-one. So I kind of see that my Twitter presence over the last 10 years has grown that is a real privilege to act on behalf of other people and schools. My next question is, why do we celebrate Ofsted inspections? We all work really hard. We need some recognition. But yet, we all fall into the trap where we celebrate the machine that measures us. Our audience are parents. But then we put this on our gates, We put numbers all over it, 75%, 95%. But why don't we do this instead? Instead of putting on pencils and letterheads, why can't we say, the school supports our professional development to be better as a member of staff? Or an ex-student, my time at school was better. Fantastic. Or I feel happy and safe if you're a student. Wouldn't that be a lovely way of celebrating the hard work that we do in schools? So it's just looking at it from a different way. Remind you your paperclip. So policies, top-down policies. Now, there's been lots of reform, curriculum assessment particularly last couple of years. And hopefully there's a little lull on the horizon. But I'm just going to take you back to one of the first real bits of good work that came out from the DfE recently. The Workload Challenge, 44,000 responses. The survey showed, or there's lots of detail in there, but essentially 63% of staff said that, teachers said that there was too much detail. I would imagine that would be very much echoed in the room. 45% of duplication of tasks. But if you can't see this, the top one says, recording, inputting data. The second arrow says staff meetings, 26%. Hands up if you like a meeting. There you go. One or two people. I love a well-led meeting that gives me time to go away and do things within that directed time. But if I'm sitting there for 1 or 2 hours after school, after a busy day, I'm desperate to leave, to be honest. So 26%. School leaders can make a quick fix there by working smartly in school meetings and reduce that workload burden. Anyone feel any better? According to the right-hand side, you look at the analysis over the years, you're working less hours. Anyone can feel that? Hands up. Feel a difference? No? Okay, well, that's what the research shows. But then there's this, the accountability perceived by Ofsted. Now, working in a very tough school last 3 years requires improvement around our necks. That perceived pressure is always there. But very much what happens around the leadership table can determine the mood or how much you can shield that accountability from your own staff. But you look at that one at the bottom, 51% of tasks set by senior leaders for whatever perception from external accountability can lead to significant workload in your own school. So I then put out a poll, as I do, not that Twitter is a reliable poll, but with 8 million impressions per month, which is, again, very flattering. This is just an indication of the audience that I have. That's 17.3 million impressions over a quarter. So if you're familiar with impressions, it just means people see it on your screen. Okay, so they see either the question that I pose, or the blog, or this particular poll. So I put, in your opinion, is Ofsted the main driver, or is it school leaders? And this, Sean Harford was batting on about school leaders have to be held to account in some ways. And I was a bit taken back. But after putting this poll, it's made me really think, and think of the relationships I've had with some of my colleagues over the years, that we do have a bit more of a responsibility in our own schools to reduce workload for our teachers. So in terms of solutions, this is what I did in my school. So I'll share those shortly. But if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see the first one-page summary of the workload report that was shared in 2015. It was a great document. 50% of school leaders, according to latest polls, still haven't seen that document. Okay, 2 years later, we've got a nice shiny poster with loads of logos along the bottom. Might have been put in 1 or 2 staff rooms, but still, 50% of school leaders haven't seen this document or probably shared it. So what we did, we modified marking requirements. So we started to take control, try to be a bit creative. So we reduced lesson planning and marking. So these are some of the kind of things that we did to be creative within our schools. So we got rid of lesson plans altogether. We gave staff the option to use the 5-minute lesson plan, which a teacher will be familiar with. Essentially, we did a lot of work with our staff just in terms of stickability, which is the cognition of learning, not what you're doing in a lesson, but why. And we worked very hard there to reduce that burden of lesson planning, but equally support new teachers to the profession so that they learnt the process of lesson planning. In terms of marking, this was one of our first CPD sessions 3 or 4 years ago. We published on the left what we wanted our staff to do, on the right what we didn't want our teachers to do. And over time we started introducing zonal marking, which is, you might have heard the term yellow box. It comes from a school, Nottinghamshire, George Spencer Academy, or Lincolnshire, somewhere like that. And essentially it looks like this. You've got a whole page essay. It works in lots of different subjects, art and PE included, where you might just mark the first paragraph. A zonal, you'd then leave a diagnostic comment, although I would argue that that one on the top right is probably too detailed. And then the empty box determines how much you want the student to redraft. One disclaimer, if you use this idea already or you want to think about it, it doesn't have to be yellow, because as soon as you start to implicate colours or frequency on staff, you're increasing the cognition of the things that they have to think about doing before they actually do it. So you need to think about how you can make teachers' lives easier. Verbal feedback, another bugbear of mine. Some people might have these in their classrooms or in their schools. Now, again, this is a byproduct of perhaps a broken system or an evidence culture. If I come and talk to the student in the class, which teachers do every single day, why do I need to stamp in the book that I've spoken to Ross for someone to see 2 or 3 weeks later? It's nonsense. Think about it in this way. This team, it's half-time, they're losing, it's the cup final. The coach brings them together and starts to write down. Ross needs to go down the left-hand side, he's going to cross the ball, Mike's going to head it in. And all the players are having their orange and lemonade and getting a bit frustrated. And then the whistle goes and they haven't been given any feedback. And as you would expect, they lose the game. And they come back into the change room, the captain sees a crumpled bit of paper, which are the coach's notes. He uncrumples the paper, and he can see all the instructions, all the feedback that they needed to win the game. But in essence, it was too late. They needed that verbal feedback there and then. Now, you think of your drama teachers, your PE teachers, who always give verbal feedback outside or inside the drama room, or myself as a design technologist, teachers do it all the time in every lessons. We tell students what to do. But just because it's not evidenced there and then on a written document doesn't mean the student isn't making progress. So, in the nature of my Twitter audience, I started a little bit of action research. I want to dispel this myth that written is the best form. We know feedback. If you're familiar with John Hattie's visible learning, you'll know that feedback has 0.7 on student outcomes over time. But we don't know if it's written or verbal, so I'd like to unpick that. I had the privilege of meeting John Hattie in June. So I've got 114 schools in my sample, and we're starting this after half term. So if you still want to sign up, it's not too late. Not quite sure where we're going to go, but we're looking at a methodology and keeping safeguarding in mind with student data. Got 6 countries and 4 continents. These are all schools over England and Wales. This is the kind of sample so far, the number on roll. So I've got one school with 60 students. So there's 32 in that area, and then I've got one school with over 3,000 students. So there's a real sample, potential impact on 97,000 students. So I'm very excited to see where that goes, and Mike and other people that I'm definitely going to try and come and knock on some doors and show some data to hopefully show that a teacher that gives verbal feedback can make just, if not better, progress on a child than someone who's teaching the same project using written. So over the last year or two, I've started to ask myself, if teaching and learning, the policy is not statutory, why should you have one? So there's an issue of compliance, perhaps, if you're in a difficult situation, or consistency. So we work very hard. All these bullet points on the left represent a training session, a staff discussion, staff training sessions, working together, working in departments or a body of staff collectively. And we try to reduce workload. But when our Ofsted inspection team come in, they just looked at one. Can you ever guess what it was? So we plan lessons, we mark books, we teach. They looked at marking. So that represents marking. All that white space is the good work that we've done over the last 3 years to reduce workload. The black dot represents the marking part. So I would say having a teaching and learning policy was a big mistake. And without getting sued by Carlsberg, probably the best teaching and learning policy, or at least the guidance for new staff to offer some clarity, would just be these 3 simple sentences. Feedback is regular. Take away the number, because again, you're batting teachers over the head if you start to say that they've got to mark 4 times a week. Make it regular, diagnostic, primarily formative, planning that consider why you're learning, not what, and that we want teachers to teach with explicit language so that students know what's expected of them. I can't see anything more complicated that's needed than that. So that would be my new policy. Again, remind you of your paperclip, please. Have a think about some ideas or some creative ways you can use it. So number 3, the current school agenda impact on the art subject. So I'm very passionate about this, being a design technologist, and as a school leader, having to look at whole school approaches, budget decisions, and then seeing as the funding. My school, we lost £1 million over the last 3 years in terms of funding. A school in central London. And as staff left, we wouldn't replace them because we had to avoid redundancies. We had to work a bit smarter and increase the contact ratio, unfortunately, for staff as well. So you'll be very familiar with this. Now, I'm not saying EBAC is to blame, particularly for the decline in design technology teachers. This pattern's been around for a number of years. But all this research is available Ofsted DFE. It's on my blog or summary, and I'm sure most of you have seen this if you're a teacher. But you can see that the arts subjects are taking a hit, and the current dialogue. And this is not just London schools, this is national. So a few little tweets. I'm lucky enough to have a privilege of having a few House of Lords members on my Twitter channel. So Lord Kirkcaldy, Nick there on the left, kept saying, put it on the agenda in the House of Lords. So he'd raise the question, and then Lord Nash would say, if you can see in the circle, it says, we'll announce the EBAC results in due course. So I was batting this for a good year. And eventually it came out. It took 500 days for them to read 2,500 responses. Now, I think that's questionable. We had a 25-page report. I think 5 pages were references of all the different schools. And largely, you know, I annotated my own version. If you want to have a laugh and look at all my feelings of the EBAC to the DFE, that's on my site. But 87 school leaders, this is an ASCL poll. This is an old poll, about a year or two old now. But 87% of school leaders oppose the EBAC. And then if you look at this, so for people that are non-teachers, just to give it some clarity, students have to choose these subjects on the top right of that table. And then you're left with all these subjects on the left-hand side. This big list here, you've got to squeeze into your option block. So, you know, I'm a design technology teacher. I've taught cookery, resistant materials. I've done a bit of ICT and art in my time as well, a bit of computing. You know, you wonder why creative teachers are feeling a bit squeezed. You know, you think of your own students in your own setting. Are we doing this because the government says so, because we're being measured? Possibly. But we've got to think about what our students want. And, you know, we look at research in our society of the impact creative industries have on our society. But this is a short summary of the EBAC. You know, the targets, they want, what essentially they said when they published it was 90% of students taking the EBAC by 2025. Schools can choose which pupils to exempt from the EBAC, so we wonder what type of students will not choose those subjects. And the government believes, particularly Nick Gibb, that the EBAC will still enable students to access other subjects. Head or heart? Teachers in the room only. Hands up who grades less than still in their school. I'm hoping you're either too scared to put your hand up, or everyone is now in a place where they're looking at the heart, where they want to nurture and develop the teachers. So if you look at this graphic, this is design technologies. Now, we know the creative process is complex. It's not what I or you were probably educated back at school 20, 30 years ago, where it's a linear process when you have a design brief and then you create something and then you evaluate it. We know creative. I think of my son who does lots of little code and he's 6 years old. He's already using Scratch on the iPad, collaborating with his friends online. It's incredible what students can do today in terms of a creative process. So how we do things is very much different. But this is a document I used to share 10 years ago. It's really embarrassing every time I put it up. And over time, all my school leaders would come to me, Ross is inadequate, Ross is outstanding. I'd then X them in a box and take them to the governors or Ofsted and say, we are 84% outstanding or whatever. And we know if you're a teacher, this dialogue's finished, but a lot of schools still do this. And for non-teachers in the room, a teacher would teach up to 800 hours a year, but yet they're still measured in 3 snapshots, 3 observations in a year. So we wonder why teachers either close their doors or perform for when someone's in the room, because the person observing gets more benefit from the teacher. So I've moved to a coaching model, and I'm doing lots of coaching CPD with schools all around the country. And the process that we set up was that we allocated 10 teachers to be a coach. It was 1 lesson on the timetable. There was a cost for this, but essentially we asked them to observe a teacher 50 minutes every week and feedback 30 minutes every week. And the 30 minutes, guess what? It was in directed time, so it wasn't something that you had to try and struggle to do in your lunch. It was optional, the paperwork, hooray, no paperwork, but the training was really rigorous, and relationships existed outside of hierarchies. So it was really good, but the cost was about £8,000. If you look at 10 teachers on the main pay scale, it's going to get more expensive if you start to use teachers that are on higher salaries. But if you take those out of lessons, you have to replace that cost. So there are on-costs involved. So broadly speaking, 10 teachers at various levels, you're looking at about that cost. And in a climate where schools are having less budgets, it's still a very difficult ask for some schools to do. I'm a large secondary school. Our CPD budget was very generous, £100,000 in my first year there 4 years ago, whereas now it's minimal, it's less than £20,000. And I'm sure in your school setting, your CPD budget is pretty much the same. So the impact on schools. So just want to finish off with just my own experiences, really. I'm sure you all have yours, but which image excites you? Is it that image? Or is it that one? No, I'm very creative, and I like doing things like that. And I know there's a need for exams. And there's all this dialogue about teaching to the test, getting through the curriculum, teaching all these lessons, rather than worrying about what students are taking away, or long-term life skills even. Then school visits. So, you think of the current climate, we've got terrorism, things like that. It's a very difficult situation that we're all living in. But, our students going here to take part in loads of events, going to kind of key venues in London. But then we live in times where we've got this. Jihadi John was an ex-student at my school, and the impact on that was incredible. And the information that the DfE said they would do and what they actually didn't was quite damaging to the school too. So we live in very challenging times, and we have a responsibility. In terms of professional development, we have to invest in our teachers. For a long time, I've spent a lot of my extra free time getting teachers together at teach meets, on boats, at conferences, live streaming to the internet so people can watch on the sofa at home. So I feel that's a real privilege through my Twitter feed. But just something simple, publishing a diet. I've got a support staff version of this. But in terms of all the different programs, it offers staff a bit of transparency of what they can engage with long term rather than that one-off CPD, which gets a real bad reputation. And there's good reasons why. So something like a simple fix like that, if you don't have a menu, get it up and give it to your staff. It encourages that creativity, it encourages staff to engage. And we need to invest in our teachers. We've got funding reductions, your Ofsted judgments, how that determines the mood of your school. It determines your school priorities. But we have to remember that teachers are there to teach, but they have 90% of their time on a timetable. Well, they have very little else to do anything else. So teachers in the room will be very familiar with this. So until that changes, until we get more funding to free teachers from their timetable to mark, plan, and do behaviour phone calls in their school day, we're still going to have less teachers entering the profession. Still people reporting that they're struggling with workload. Still school leaders looking externally to dictate the mood internally. And then we're going to get to a place where we're feeling saturated. I'm sure a lot of people here today, teachers particularly, feeling very happy to be out of school. The time to reflect. We need to reflect in situ outside of the situation. But at the back of your head, you'll have something ticking away all those emails and all those books to mark. That will never go away. So, paper clips. If you have a paper clip, hands up who got one at the door. Have you had a little fiddle? Okay, great. So let's have a couple of people hands up. Let's have some shouting out. What have we made? Some ideas just to finish off. A ring, very nice. Another idea, please. Paperclip people. There's a few of you. A pair of earrings, lovely. So hopefully you've been keeping creative while I've been having a little rant up here. So you can hold it, stitch your hem together, clean your fingernails. If we still use CDs on our computer, keychain, lottery ticket scratcher, hold the collar of your shirt. I've done that before. A fish hook, Christmas tree decoration, money clip, and a necklace clasp. So there's some ideas, and there's a couple of pictures. So it's important, external agencies. The mood or the role the school leader holds in a school to protect the staff in very difficult circumstances. We can still be creative, but at what cost? So my takeaway would be these. We need to stop celebrating the machine. We need to celebrate differently. We need to take control of the agenda. Policies, don't do the things you don't have to, particularly the perception of things that you have to do. Teachers always will need to mark, they'll always need to lesson plan, they'll always need to teach. So we shouldn't overcomplicate matters. Verbal feedback should become the default mode for marking in classrooms. We should stop grading teachers. We should move to a coaching model where we can nurture and keep teachers in the profession. We should definitely fund schools, because funding will enable schools to have less contact ratio, schools to be more creative. But without that, then nothing's going to change. And we should invest in teacher development. You know, if I gave you a nice sum of money to engage in your own research, or dare I say I made it your appraisal target, and you said, why are year 12s opting out of AS history, and that became my research project to benefit myself and the school, I would much rather engage in appraisal in that method rather than me saying that you've got to have X, Y, Z outstanding, or 4 out of 10 kids with this grade. So we need to change the dialogue with appraisal too, and I'm all for accountability and high standards, but we need to do things differently. That's all, folks. Lots of information in there. I appreciate you listening, and have a great rest of the morning. Thank you.